is Silent Heir, Part 2, The Naive Daughter. Flashbacks. The Caldwell mansion smelled of lilies and old wood, a place that carried the weight of generations. Isabella wandered the hallways after the will reading, her steps slow, deliberate, her eyes catching on portraits of her ancestors. Their stern gazes seemed to follow her, reminding her of the legacy she had never truly belonged to. The polished marble floor reflected her hesitant figure, a grown woman who still felt like a timid girl in her father's house. Her mind drifted backward, unbidden. Memories came in fragments first, then gathered force until they played out in full color, as vivid as yesterday. She was 8 years old again, sitting cross-legged on the carpet of her father's study, clutching a picture book. Richard Caldwell was seated behind his vast mahogany desk, his silver hair gleaming under the light. But his attention wasn't on her. Michael, only 11, stood before the desk gesturing confidently, speaking with a self-assurance that seemed impossible for a boy. "Father, if we raise the prices on the timber shipments, people will still buy," Michael declared, his young voice steady. "They need it. They don't have a choice." Richard leaned back, eyes narrowing with admiration. "Smart boy," he said, his deep voice rumbling. "You're thinking like a businessman already." Isabella's small hand went up timidly. "Daddy, look at my drawing. It's a castle." "Not now, Isabella," Richard said absently, waving her off without even glancing at her paper. His eyes were fixed on Michael. "Tell me more. What would happen if our competitors tried to lower their prices?" Michael's smile widened. "We'd buy them out, crush them." The sound of her father's booming laugh filled the room. He reached across the desk and ruffled Michael's hair with pride. Isabella sat still, her drawing slipping from her hands, unremarked. Her chest ached with the sting of being invisible, but she forced herself to smile anyway. Another memory rose, this time at the dinner table. Isabella remembered the clink of silverware, the smell of roast beef, and the way her father's eyes shone only when Michael spoke. "I was chosen as class president again," Michael said smugly, slicing his meat with precision. "They trust me to lead." "Of course they do," Richard said, his voice warm, proud. "It's in your blood." Isabella poked at her peas, her voice small. "I won the spelling bee at school today." Richard glanced at her briefly. "Good girl." Then, almost instantly, his gaze slid back to Michael. "Tell me more about what your teacher said." Michael smirked across the table at her, and Isabella dropped her eyes to her plate, cheeks burning. She told herself it didn't matter. Michael was destined to be the heir. She was just the daughter, the quiet one, the obedient one. There was a darker memory, too, one that revealed Michael's true cunning even in their youth. She had been 12, hiding in the garden with her journal, scribbling stories about fairy tale kingdoms where daughters could be queens, not shadows. Michael found her there, his voice dripping with mockery. "What are you writing this time, Izzy? Another story about princesses?" He snatched the notebook from her hands before she could react. His eyes scanned the page, and he laughed. "Pathetic. Do you really think anyone cares about this nonsense? Father says you need to grow up. Give it back." Isabella's voice trembled, more with shame than anger. Michael leaned closer, his smile sharp. "Here's a lesson for you. The world doesn't reward dreamers. It rewards winners. That's why Father listens to me. You should remember your place." He tossed the notebook into the fountain, watching the pages bleed with ink. Isabella fought back tears, but deep down, she believed him. Maybe he was right. Maybe her place was always to stand in the shadows. When Isabella was finally old enough and had the means to free herself, she left Caldwell Manor behind. She settled quietly in Paris, far from the weight of her family name. Her father did nothing to stop her. Paris felt home as she spent some of her youth in the city. She rented a small flat above a bakery in the Marais district. She found work as a junior accountant in a modest firm near the Rue de Rivoli. The pay was meager, the hours long, but Isabella welcomed the anonymity. Her life in Paris was uneventful by any grand measure. She walked the Seine alone on Sundays, bought secondhand novels in French, and sent occasional letters home that went unanswered. To anyone watching, she was a shadow, gentle, polite, unremarkable. Back in the present, Isabella blinked against the sting of old tears. The mansion around her felt colder now, the memories echoing in its walls. She pressed a hand against the smooth wood of the banister, grounding herself. A voice intruded on her reverie. "Still wandering around like a ghost, Izzy?" She turned to see Michael at the top of the stairs, his tall frame impeccable in his tailored suit. His smirk was the same as when they were children. He descended slowly, each step deliberate, his presence commanding. "You haven't changed. Always looking like you don't quite belong." Isabella forced a smile. Her instinct to appease automatic. "It's just strange being back here." Michael's gaze flicked over her, cool, assessing. "You're right. It is strange. Father always said you preferred your little adventures abroad, left the real responsibilities to me." She lowered her eyes, just as she had as a girl. "Father trusted you. And he was right to." Michael's voice carried that same confidence, edged with arrogance. "Caldwell Industries needs someone decisive. Don't take it too hard," he said smoothly, referring to the events of the will. "You'll be fine. You've always been independent." She forced a laugh, thin and wavering. "Yes, that's true." The words stung, but Isabella did what she always had. She nodded, pretending agreement. He studied her for a moment longer. For a fleeting second, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Satisfaction, as though savoring her weakness. Then turned away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Isabella turned back toward the hall, her hands clenched at her sides, hidden from his view. She told herself it didn't matter. She had played this part all her life. Quiet, invisible, obedient. But for the first time, as her brother's footsteps faded behind her, she wondered, how much longer could she bear it? Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Caldwell estate, gilding the corridors in pale gold. Isabella moved quietly through the house, her fingers brushing against the familiar wood paneling, as though touch alone might help her reclaim a sense of belonging. But the house no longer welcomed her. It breathed Michael's authority now, not her father's memory. She turned a corner and almost collided with Mrs. Hughes, the long-serving housekeeper. "Oh, Mrs. Hughes," Isabella said, smiling warmly. "It's been so long. You used to bring me cocoa when I couldn't sleep." Mrs. Hughes's expression softened for a fleeting second, then quickly rearranged into professional neutrality. "Yes, Miss Caldwell." It's just Isabella, she said gently. You used to call me that. The housekeeper hesitated, then gave a curt nod. Yes, miss. Will that be all? The words landed like a small blow. Isabella forced her smile to remain. Yes, thank you. Mrs. Hughes gave a polite bow of the head and moved briskly away, as though speaking too long with Isabella might be an error. At mid-morning, Isabella found herself in the library, running her fingers along rows of leather-bound books. She remembered hiding there as a child, reading fairy tales while Michael attended his father's business meetings. The library had once been her sanctuary. Now, it felt borrowed. She heard voices behind her. Such a shame, really, one woman whispered. Yes, another replied. She's pleasant enough, but Richard never trusted her with anything important. Not like Michael. They say she lived alone all those years abroad. Painting, writing, something frivolous. Isabella stiffened, her cheeks burning. She turned slightly and saw two family friends, Mrs. Whitmore and Lady Green, their heads bent together, voices low, but not low enough. Lady Green noticed her and smiled too brightly. Isabella, dear, we were just talking about how well you look. Paris must have agreed with you. Thank you, Isabella said softly. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes flicked toward her. I hope the travel didn't distract you from family matters. You know how devoted your father was to Michael. Isabella lowered her gaze, nodding. Yes, father always believed in him. Quite right, Lady Green said briskly, and it's only fitting. Michael has the presence, the strength. You were always different. Different. Isabella smiled faintly, though her heart twisted. I suppose I was. At lunch, Michael dominated the conversation. He sat at the head of the long dining table, his voice carrying easily. Father never shied away from risk, Michael declared, addressing a group of Richard's former associates. And neither will I. Expansion into Asia is the future. Caldwell Industries won't just compete, will dominate. The men nodded eagerly, raising their glasses. Isabella, seated halfway down the table, spoke softly, almost to herself. Father used to say, caution was as valuable as ambition. But Michael caught it. His smile sharpened. Father said many things, Izzy. What he said to me was that the world rewards boldness. You should remember that. The table chuckled, several pairs of eyes flicking toward her with amusement. Isabella's cheeks burned, but she ducked her head and stirred her soup. Later she wandered into the garden, hoping for solitude. The roses her mother once tended were wild now, their thorns unchecked. She knelt to touch a bloom when a familiar voice rang out. Careful, Izzy. Wouldn't want you pricking your fingers on something sharp. She turned to see Michael, leaning against the stone archway, hands in his pockets, looking every bit the master of the estate. It's beautiful here, she said quietly. It's Father's legacy, Michael replied. He studied her for a moment, then added with deliberate cruelty, Sometimes I wonder why you came back. This isn't your world anymore. It never really was. Isabella swallowed hard, her voice trembling. It's still home. Michael's laugh was soft, mocking. Home? Don't kid yourself. People see you as a guest, at best. At worst, a distraction. Don't make yourself a nuisance, Izzy. You wouldn't want to be in my way. His words cut deep, though she kept her eyes lowered. "I wouldn't," she said quickly. "Of course not." Michael straightened, satisfied. "Good girl. Stay out of trouble." He walked away, leaving her alone among the roses. That evening, the house grew quiet. Isabella sat in the parlor, watching the flames in the fireplace dance and crackle. The voices of the day replayed in her head. Different, frivolous, not your world. She clasped her mother's pocket watch, holding it tightly until her knuckles whitened. It ticked steadily in her palm, each beat a reminder that she was still here, no matter how unwelcome she felt. Her reflection wavered in the glass of the watch. Timid, small, obedient. She closed her eyes, whispering aloud, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong." The fire popped sharply, and she flinched. But even as the doubt consumed her, the watch ticked on steady and patient, waiting, as though it knew something she didn't yet understand.